The wind howled across the barren hills like a pack of wolves crying for blood. It clawed at the edges of the weathered cabin nestled in the folds of a dying prairie, rattling the cracked window panes and slipping through the broken seams of old wooden walls. Inside, the flickering glow of a single oil lamp cast long, trembling shadows on the walls as Clara Jennings pressed a patch of cloth over her fingers and forced the needle through a torn sleeve for the fourth time that day. Outside, the last light of evening had long been devoured by dark clouds rolling across the sky like a vengeful army. Thunder cracked in the distance, and rain began its steady assault, hammering the roof with a force that felt like nature's fury turned personal. Clara didn't flinch. She was used to storms, used to hardship, used to everything falling apart around her. What she wasn't used to was giving up. Beside the hearth, 10-year-old Eli stacked damp logs that barely crackled when touched by the struggling fire. His shirt hung loose on his thin frame, patched so many times it looked more like a quilt than clothing. Across the room, his younger sister Lila, just 6, sat cross-legged on the worn braided rug, cradling a wooden doll with one eye and no legs. She hummed softly, her small voice trembling with the wind's rhythm, as if trying to sing the storm away. Clara glanced up from her stitching and looked at her children. Her heart tightened in her chest. They were good kids, quiet, obedient, too wise for their years. The kind of wisdom only hunger and absence could teach. Their father had died 3 winters ago in a logging accident up north. The company gave her $15 and a coffin. Since then, life had turned into a long series of just enoughs. Just enough food to last until next week, just enough firewood to survive the night, just enough strength to keep going when nothing made sense. "Eli," Clara said softly, her voice raspy from too many cold nights and not enough warm food. "We're running low on kindling. Could you check the pile by the shed? Make it quick before the rain picks up too bad." The boy nodded without hesitation, slipping on his coat and hat before bolting out the door. Clara set her sewing aside and moved to the window, wiping the glass with her sleeve as she watched him run. She didn't like sending him out in weather like this, but the fire was already waning and they couldn't afford to let it die. Minutes passed. The wind howled louder. Lightning painted the sky in jagged bursts of silver and white. Clara's gut twisted. She stepped toward the door to call him back when it burst open, nearly knocked off its hinges. Eli stood there, soaked to the bone, his face white as the full moon behind the clouds. "Mama!" he shouted over the roar of the storm. "There's a man, out by the trees. He's hurt bad." "What?" Clara rushed to him, grabbing his shoulders. "What man?" "Out past the fence. I saw something lying in the mud. I thought it was a deer, but, Mama, it's a man. He's bleeding. He's not moving." Clara didn't ask questions. She grabbed the lantern, threw her shawl over her shoulders, and followed Eli into the storm. The rain stabbed at her skin, her boots sank into the sludge, and the wind fought her with every step. They reached the grove of twisted trees behind the cabin, and there, lying face down in the mud, was a man. He was tall, broad-shouldered, dressed in what had once been a fine coat, now soaked and torn. Blood oozed from a gash on his head and soaked into the collar of his shirt. A revolver lay inches from his hand. His face was turned toward the earth, half buried in wet leaves. Clara dropped to her knees and touched his neck. There was a pulse, faint but steady. "He's alive," she said, blinking against the rain. "Help me lift him." Together, she and Eli grunted and heaved, dragging the man through the mud, across the backyard, and into the cabin. Lila gasped and backed away as they laid him near the fire. "Get me towels," Clara ordered, already peeling off the man's coat. The boy ran to comply while Clara checked the wound. The cut on his forehead looked deep, but clean. His chest rose and fell with slow breaths. His hands were blistered and cold as ice. Lila stood by silently, clutching her doll to her chest. Clara worked quickly, her hands steady. She had helped her husband with hunting wounds once. and old Miss Waverly had shown her how to bind up cuts from tools and animals. She boiled water, crushed herbs, cleaned the wound, and wrapped his head in linen. By the time she was done, the storm was beginning to quiet, but the man had not stirred. Hours passed. The fire blazed stronger, thanks to Eli's hard work. Clara changed the man's bandage again as the children slept. She watched his face, lined, weathered, with stubble on his chin and a sharp jaw. He had the look of someone who'd seen hard years and met them with harder eyes. She sat down nearby, exhausted but alert. He might have been an outlaw, might have brought danger to her door, but letting someone die in the mud wasn't something Clara Jennings would ever allow. The man stirred before dawn. He groaned low in his throat, his eyes fluttering open beneath the makeshift bandage. Where am I?" he rasped. "Safe," Clara said, holding the cup of water to his lips. "You're in my home. You were nearly dead when my boy found you." His eyes darted around the room. They were steel gray, sharp and calculating, like a caged animal suddenly aware of new surroundings. "My gun," he said, struggling to sit up. "It's here," Clara said, nodding toward the table. "We're not thieves, but if you mean us harm, I'll ask you kindly to leave once you're able." He stared at her, confused, then slumped back. "No harm. Just got jumped. Needed to get away." "Well, you did a poor job of it," she said, her voice dry. "You lost a fair amount of blood." He closed his eyes, breathing slow. "What's your name?" Clara asked after a moment. The man was silent for a long time. Then he opened his eyes and stared into the flames. "Don't matter." Clara didn't push. She'd seen that kind of refusal before, in men broken by war or pain or grief. Names were the first thing they buried. She stood. "Rest. You're not going anywhere until you can walk." For 2 days he said nothing more. He slept, ate the thin soup she offered, and kept his revolver within arm's reach. Eli and Lila watched him with a mix of curiosity and fear. He watched them back with unreadable eyes. Once, Lila offered him a small biscuit with both hands. He took it silently, and for the first time, Clara thought she saw the corner of his mouth twitch in something like gratitude. Clara continued her chores, tending the stove, washing clothes, mending boots. She spoke little, only what was needed. She was used to silence. On the third morning, he surprised her. "You got a husband?" Clara looked up from the stove. "Had one. He's gone." He nodded slowly, as if that answered something unspoken. "You're strong. Most would have left me." "Most don't have 2 kids watching their every move, learning what kind of people to be," she replied. He watched her for a long time after that. By the end of the week, the stranger had begun moving more. He limped to the window, examined the hills with a grim face, then returned to his cot by the fire. He still wouldn't give his name, still wouldn't say who he was running from or what brought him here. But one evening, Clara found him sitting beside Eli, showing the boy how to sharpen a stick with a carving knife. Lila sat nearby, braiding a strip of fabric into her doll's hair. She said nothing, just stood by the door and watched. For the first time in years, there was laughter, quiet, unsure, but real. Later, when the children had gone to bed, she brought him a blanket and paused. "Whatever you're running from," she said, "you don't have to explain. But as long as you're here, you're under my roof, and under my protection." The man looked at her. For a moment, the mask cracked. His face softened, eyes gleaming in the firelight. "You don't know who I am," he said. "No," Clara said, "but I know what you're not. You're not cruel. You're not heartless. And you're not alone anymore." He looked at the blanket in his lap, then up at her again. "Name's Beau," he said quietly. Clara gave a small nod and turned away, her heart heavy with the weight of what she didn't yet know, but filled, too, with something rare and unfamiliar. Hope. The morning sun filtered through the thin cotton curtains, casting stripes of soft gold across the worn floorboards. Clara stood by the stove, her hands dusted with flour as she worked a lump of dough into flat biscuits. The cabin was quiet, except for the occasional pop of the firewood and the creak of old timbers adjusting to the change in temperature. She could hear Lila humming softly in the corner, dressing her ragged doll in scraps of cloth. Eli was outside, feeding what few chickens they had left, his small hands always busy. Bo sat near the window now, no longer confined to the mattress beside the hearth. His coat still hung loose on his frame, and the color had not fully returned to his face, but the worst of his injuries were behind him. What remained was a man still cloaked in silence, still wrapped in mystery, even as his body grew stronger. He stared out at the hills, eyes unmoving. His revolver was never far, always within reach, as if a ghost lingered just beyond the tree line. He hadn't said more than a dozen words in the 2 days since revealing his name, and even those had come like rusted bolts turning after years of stillness. Clara didn't press him. She had her own instincts, sharpened by years of hardship and loss. She knew when to leave a man to his silence, and when that silence was a cage rather than a shield. Bo's was a prison. That much she was sure of. She set a tin plate with biscuits and beans on the table and nodded toward him. "You should eat something real, not just whatever's in that flask you think I don't notice." His mouth twitched, almost a smirk, almost a challenge, but he said nothing. He moved slowly, favoring his ribs, and sat at the table. Lila watched him with wide eyes as he took a bite and chewed in silence. She had begun drawing closer to him each day, first out of curiosity, now out of something warmer. Children saw truth where grown folks got fooled. She hadn't stopped studying him since he'd arrived. "Where were you going before you got hurt?" she asked from her corner. Bo paused, biscuit halfway to his mouth. His eyes found hers, then Clara's. Lila waited, patient in a way only the young could be, because they didn't yet know what answers could cost. "Nowhere," he said finally. Eli came back in, shaking the cold from his coat, his cheeks pink from wind. "I fixed the coop fence," he said proudly. "No more holes." Clara smiled and tousled his hair. "Good. That should keep the foxes out." Bo set down his fork and leaned back. "You teach 'em all this?" he asked quietly. "I teach what life don't," Clara replied. He nodded, slow and thoughtful. "You do a fine job." The words caught her off guard. She turned away and began pouring coffee to hide the faint smile that tugged at her lips. That afternoon, Bo walked to the edge of the woods with Eli. The boy insisted on showing him the trap he'd set for rabbits, and despite Clara's hesitation, she let them go. She watched from the porch as the 2 figures disappeared into the pines. The larger one, leaning slightly, still stiff, still scarred, but walking nonetheless. She turned her attention back to the mending. Her thoughts, however, wandered. There was something about the way Bo spoke now, measured, as if each word was sifted through some hidden weight. He wasn't just a man on the run. He was someone who'd once known command. His hands, though callous, were precise. The way he cleaned his gun, the way he moved. There was too much purpose in him to be accidental. By the time they returned, Eli had caught nothing but was grinning all the same. Bo ruffled the boy's hair before stepping inside. That evening, Clara set a candle in the window. It was a habit more than a necessity, an old tradition she never let go of. Light for the lost, her husband used to call it. She hadn't missed a single night since he passed. "You always do that?" Bo asked, nodding toward the flame. "Every night," she said. "For anyone out there who might be wandering. For the lost." "You think someone's looking?" "I think someone's always looking, whether they know it or not." Bo stared at the flame, his face unreadable. Later, after the children had gone to sleep, Clara found him on the porch, smoking a hand-rolled cigarette and staring out into the dark. She joined him, wrapping her shawl tighter around her shoulders. "Nice night," she said. "Too quiet," he replied. "I like quiet." Bo glanced at her. "You ever wonder what's beyond them hills?" "I used to. Not anymore. My world's right here." He nodded. It's a good world." A long silence settled between them, broken only by the chirp of night insects and the occasional crackle of cooling wood. Finally, Clara turned to him. "You're not just running from a fight, are you?" His jaw tightened. "I don't need details," she said gently, "but my children sleep under this roof. If trouble's coming, I need to know what kind." He didn't speak right away. When he did, his voice was low, worn down. "I had a place, big. Cattle, men, wagons, land that reached past the horizon. Built it with my own hands. Bought what I couldn't build. Paid who I needed to. Took what was left. That kind of life, it don't make you many friends. Only enemies waiting for a reason. And they found one," Clara said. He nodded. "My own blood, nephew. Took what I had, filled the ears of others with lies. Said I was mad. Said I'd gone soft. Put a price on my head. Didn't matter how many years I fed 'em. They turned on me like wolves." Clara said nothing. Her fingers curled around the edge of her shawl. "Don't know how many are looking," he continued. "Could be they think I'm dead already. Could be they're still out there, but I ain't going back. Why not? Because there's nothing left worth taking back. And what they stole, it ain't who I am anymore." Clara exhaled slowly, watching her breath cloud in the cold. "Well," she said softly, "you're not the only one who lost something they can't get back." Their eyes met, and something unspoken passed between them. Two lives scarred by betrayal, by grief, bound by the quiet agreement of survival. A week passed. The routine of life returned. Bo helped chop wood. He taught Eli how to reinforce the coop fence properly, how to oil the hinges on the barn door. He even showed Lila how to braid string into a snare, though she preferred turning it into jewelry for her doll. Clara watched him closely. The way he moved. The way he softened around the children, especially at night when Lila would tug on his sleeve and whisper a secret into his ear. He'd smile then, faint but real. He never asked for more food than what was offered, never demanded, never intruded. But his presence filled the cabin like a storm cloud waiting to break, quiet, heavy, and impossible to ignore. One night they heard a horse in the distance, then two. Clara stood at the door, her hand clutching a rifle that had belonged to her husband. Bo moved beside her silently, his revolver already in hand. "Could just be riders passing through," she whispered. Bo shook his head. "They don't ride that slow if they're passing." He slipped out the back, disappearing into the shadows like he was born from them. Two riders approached, both cloaked, rifles on their backs, eyes scanning the yard. "Evening, ma'am," one called. "Apologies for the late visit. We're looking for someone. Might have passed this way. Injured man. Dangerous." Clara didn't lower her weapon. "Ain't seen no one. Just me and my children." The second rider leaned forward. "You sure? Man's name is Bo Callahan. Stole from his own people. We got reason to believe he came through these hills." She forced a smile. "And I got reason to believe you're scaring my children." The riders glanced at each other. One nudged his horse forward. "We'll be moving on then. If you do see him, I'll be sure to write a letter," Clara cut in. They turned, disappearing down the trail. Once the sound of hooves faded, Bo returned, silent and grim. "They'll be back," he said. "I figured I should go." "No." Bo looked at her, surprised. "This is my home," she said. "And if danger's knocking, I'd rather face it with a man who can shoot straight and fix a roof than face it alone." His eyes softened. "I won't let nothing happen to you or the kids," he said quietly. "I know." Inside, the fire burned low. The children slept soundly. Outside, the darkness stretched long and wide. But inside that cabin, two people sat close by the hearth. Not quite strangers, not quite safe, but no longer alone in the fight. And somewhere in that silence, trust began to take root. Not the kind forged in words, but in actions, in shared meals, in late-night watch shifts, in the steady rhythm of life built from scratch. Bo still didn't say much. He still slept with one eye open and his gun within reach, but he started whittling small wooden toys when no one was looking. He taught Eli how to tie knots strong enough to hold a calf. He fixed the roof before Clara could ask, and when the candle was lit each night, he never asked who it was for anymore. He just sat beside her, watching the flame, as if he too was finally willing to be found. The frost came early that year. By the time October laid its pale breath across the prairie, Clara had already begun lining the inside walls of the cabin with patched quilts and extra stuffing to keep the wind from seeping through. The mornings were colder, and her fingers stung when she wrung out the laundry at dawn, the ice in the bucket nipping at her wrists. The animals grew restless. Even the sky seemed to shiver, with gray clouds stretching long and low above the hills like wool pulled too thin. Bo had been with them nearly a month. His strength returned slowly but surely, and with it, the quiet steadiness that had begun to root him deep into the soil of the Jennings lives. He rose early now, often before Clara, and she'd find the fire already stoked and Eli helping him haul logs from the woodshed before breakfast. He didn't speak unless necessary, but when he did, it carried weight. Not just to her, but to the children too. They listened, they watched. Clara noticed the way Eli mimicked the way Bo carved wood or handled tools. She noticed how Lila's once shy glances turned into lingering smiles. But as the day shortened, so did Clara's peace of mind. She had noticed the tracks, just faint impressions in the dirt along the fence line. Too wide for deer, too narrow for the plow. Once she found boot prints by the creek bed. Another time, the chicken coop door had been jostled, though no feathers were taken. And the worst of it came one morning when she woke to find the barn's side gate slightly open, as if someone had studied it during the night and walked away when they found nothing worth stealing. Bo noticed too. He never said it aloud, but she saw the way he moved, slower, more deliberate. He cleaned his revolver more often. His eyes scanned the tree line each time he stepped outside. His posture changed when he was near the children, positioning himself between them and the world beyond the fence. Clara didn't have to ask. He knew danger was coming, and it had a name. One afternoon, as the wind swept dry leaves across the porch in dancing circles, Clara caught Bo sitting with Eli at the edge of the field. They were fixing a broken fence post together. Eli held the nails while Bo used the hammer with quiet precision. When she called them in for supper, she caught a piece of their conversation. "You ever get scared?" Eli asked, not looking up. "All the time," Bo replied. "But you don't act like it. Actin' and feelin' ain't always the same thing." Clara said nothing as she set the table. The fire cracked. Lila chattered about birds she saw that morning, and Bo ate with the slow, deliberate movements of a man lost in thought. Later that night, when the children were asleep, Clara sat on the porch wrapped in a thick shawl, her fingers wrapped around a warm mug of tea. Bo stood beside the post, eyes fixed on the road beyond the creek. "They're out there, aren't they?" she asked softly. He didn't answer right away. "They've been close, too close. You think they'll come here?" "They already have, just not loud." Clara set the mug down. "You know who they are?" "Jed," Bo muttered. "And whoever he's hired to finish what they started." Clara's jaw tightened. "What did they start?" "Erasing me." She looked over at him. "Why?" "Because power don't like sharing. Because Jed thinks this land, this legacy, this name, all of it belongs to him. But you built it," he chuckled without humor. "And I bled for it. Doesn't mean a damn thing when men see more in taking than earning." "Then why haven't you left? Why are you still here, Bo?" He turned and looked at her. Really looked at her. And something flickered in his eyes. Pain, guilt, maybe even fear. "Because here's the first place I felt human in years." She looked away before his gaze could undo her. The next day, a rider came through town asking questions. Clara heard about it when she went to trade cloth for salt. Miss Wendell at the mercantile leaned close as she whispered, "Stranger in a black coat, scar across his lip, asked if anyone had seen a wounded man traveling alone. Sounded like bounty talk, if you ask me. Clara's stomach nodded. She hurried back with the supplies, her eyes scanning the trail behind her more than once. Bo was out back splitting firewood when she arrived. She told him everything. "I'll take care of it," he said, already reaching for his rifle. "You're not going anywhere," she said sharply. "If you leave now, you lead them away from us. But what if you can't outrun them? What if they follow and come back?" He hesitated. It was the first time she'd seen him unsure. "I need to protect you," he said. "Then stay," she replied. "We do this together. We fight, if we must, but we don't run." That night, Bo slept in a chair by the door, rifle on his lap. Clara didn't sleep at all. 2 nights later, the first shot came through the window. The glass shattered just inches from where Eli had been sitting moments before. Clara screamed and dragged him to the ground. Bo was already up, ducking low, firing back through the cracked pane. A second shot rang out. Then silence. Bo motioned for Clara and the children to stay low. He slipped out the back, moving through the shadows like a ghost. Clara gathered the children, whispering to keep quiet, her heart thundering against her ribs. Minutes stretched like hours. Then a gunshot. Close. Then another, farther away. Lila whimpered. Clara held her tight, rocking her gently. Eli clenched his fists, trembling with rage and fear. Another shot. Then silence. Bo returned just before dawn. His shirt was torn, a graze across his arm, blood soaking the sleeve. "I got one. The other ran." Clara stared at him. "Is it over?" "No," he said, collapsing into the chair. "That was a warning." She cleaned his wound as the sun rose, her hands steady even as her voice cracked. "Do they know you're here, Bo? I mean, really know?" "Yes. And now they know I'm not dead." The next day, the marshal arrived. Marshal Higgins was a broad-shouldered man with a heavy mustache and a wary gaze. He dismounted in front of Clara's cabin with the same care a man uses when entering a church. He removed his hat and approached slowly, watching Bo with calculated calm. "Mrs. Jennings," he said. "Heard there was trouble." "There was," she said. "Still is." Bo stood behind her, silent. The marshal looked at him. "Name?" "Bo Callan." Clara held her breath. "Thought you were dead." "I'm not." "You're wanted," I figured. "For murder, embezzlement, land theft, and a few more charges with big words attached. All brought up by your nephew." "He's lying." "I know." Clara blinked. The marshal nodded. "Half the town's scared of Jed Callahan. But no one's done a thing because he's got men, money, and fear on his side." "Then why are you here?" Bo asked. "Because I don't like being played," the marshal replied. "And I've got a hunch the man standing on this porch ain't the monster he's been painted to be." Bo said nothing. "I can't protect you," the marshal continued. "Not officially. But I won't hunt you either. If you mean to make a stand, make it count. Because next time, they won't just be scouting." Bo nodded. The marshal tipped his hat and rode off. Clara stared after him. "You going to make a stand?" she asked. Bo looked at her, eyes fierce. "I already am." She touched his arm, the one she had bandaged just hours before. "Then we do it together." Bo stepped back into the cabin. Lila looked up from the table. Eli gripped a wooden knife he'd carved the week before. The fire burned bright. And outside, in the distance, wolves were coming. But inside, the walls of that cabin held something stronger than fear. Resolve. And that was where they'd begin. The cold came in heavier the next week, pressing down from the mountains like a warning carried on wind. The leaves had all fallen, leaving the trees bare, skeletal things clawing at the gray sky. Clara could feel the difference in the air, not just from the weather, but in the way the land held its breath. The fields were quiet, the birds had gone. Even the chickens barely clucked, as if they sensed something was coming. The stillness before the storm. Bo was awake before the sun every morning. He walked the perimeter of the land, boots crunching over the frosted ground, eyes sharp and searching. He reinforced the barn doors with thick planks, stacked rocks behind the back fence to seal the gap. He built a hidden rifle nest from the loft window, covered in canvas and straw, and drilled Eli on how to load a pistol. The boy took to it faster than she'd liked. He didn't flinch now, not like before. Clara watched, heart aching, as her son became less a boy and more a soldier in training. At night, they moved the furniture. The table was pushed against the front window. The children's beds were pulled closer to the hearth, farther from the walls. Lila asked questions that broke Clara's heart. Will they come in the dark? Will they hurt us in our sleep? Clara gave answers that weren't lies but weren't truths either. No one will hurt you while I'm here. That was all she could promise. They kept the lanterns dim and the fire low, so the light wouldn't leak through the cracks and give them away. Bo slept in shifts, rifle on his lap, coat draped over his shoulders like a second skin. Clara often found herself staring at him as he sat there in silence, lit by the soft flicker of dying embers, the light catching the scar on his jaw and the weary lines around his mouth. He looked like a man carved from stone, hard, quiet, still. But his eyes never rested. They were always waiting. One night, when the children were finally asleep and the cabin was silent, Bo spoke. They won't wait long. Clara didn't respond right away. She was sitting across from him by the fire, her hands wrapped around a mug of weak tea, her body exhausted but too tense to sleep. "You're sure?" she asked. "They lost a man last time. They'll want it finished. Fast. Loud. The longer they wait, the more risk they take. Jed's not the type to leave things undone." She stared into the flames. "Do you think we'll survive?" He looked at her, and for once, there was no mask. Just a man too tired to pretend. "I don't know." Clara nodded slowly. "If something happens to me, don't. I need you to listen. If something happens to me, you take them. You take Eli and Lila, and you run. You save them. I won't let that happen. You can't stop everything, Bo." "I can try." She looked at him, tears stinging the corners of her eyes. "Promise me." He stood up, walked over, and knelt beside her. His hand covered hers, rough and warm. "I promise." The next day passed in quiet preparation. Clara made extra bread. Bo checked the horses. Eli helped fill buckets of water and stack them by the door. Every movement felt heavier, like they were preparing not just for battle but for burial. By dusk, they were ready. The sky darkened with clouds, thick and rolling, the kind that swallowed the moon and made the world feel closer, more claustrophobic. They ate dinner without speaking. Lila clung to her doll. Eli kept glancing at the window. Bo paced slowly, pausing every few minutes to listen. Clara checked the back door 3 times, even though she knew it was locked. Then came the sound. It started soft, distant hooves muffled by frost, but it grew louder, multiplied, until there was no mistaking it. Horses. Several. Approaching from the north, not the trail but through the tree line. Smart. Trying to flank. Bo moved quickly, grabbing his rifle, positioning himself at the front. He motioned for Clara to take the children to the root cellar under the back hatch. Clara nodded, ushered them down, then paused. "You too," she said. Bo shook his head. "I need to be up here. I'm not leaving you alone." "Clara." She grabbed her husband's old shotgun and loaded it with shaking hands. "I said, I'm not leaving." He didn't argue again. The hoofbeats stopped. Silence stretched long. Bo moved to the window, peeking through the gap between boards. 6 men, he whispered. "One of them's Jed." Clara felt her pulse in her throat. Her fingers curled tighter around the shotgun. Bo took a breath. "They'll try to circle, force us out, maybe set fire to the barn." "What do we do?" He glanced at her. "We end it." A voice called from the shadows. Loud, confident. "Bo Callahan, come on out. You've run far enough." Bo didn't move. Jed's voice again, closer now. "You're gonna make me come in there? I got 6 men and a bottle of kerosene that says you're not walking out if you don't give yourself up." Clara stepped beside Bo. "We won't let them take this house." He nodded. Then he opened the front door. The night air rushed in, cold and sharp. Clara stayed behind the wall, watching. "Ched," Bo called. "You always were full of wind." A laugh from the dark. Then, "There he is. The dead man speaketh." "I ain't dead." "You will be." A gunshot rang out, striking the wood near Bo's shoulder. He ducked, rolled back into the cabin. "Now!" he shouted. From the loft, Eli fired the first round. Bo had trained him to shoot without aiming to kill, just to scare, to distract. The shot hit one of the riders' saddles. The horse screamed and reared. Another gunshot cracked from the woods. Bo returned fire from the front, Clara from the side window. The cabin shook with sound. Rifle blasts, shouting, hooves tearing through the yard. The battle began in full. One of Jed's men lit a torch and hurled it toward the barn. Bo fired before it landed. The man fell. The torch missed. A scream echoed. Another man down. Clara fired again, her shoulder jarring with the recoil. Her vision blurred, with tears she didn't realize had come. This was her home, her children's home, and they were fighting for it with every breath. From the back, someone tried to force the cellar hatch. Clara heard Lila scream. She turned and ran, bursting out the door, shotgun raised. The man stood over the hatch, prying it with a crowbar. "Get away from them!" she screamed. He turned. She fired. The blast threw him back, blood splattering the snow-dusted ground. The crowbar clattered to the dirt. Clara rushed to the hatch and threw it open. "I'm here," she said, voice shaking. "Mama's here." Lila sobbed into her shoulder. Eli had come down from the loft and crouched by the door, pale but steady. More shots. Then a scream. Then silence. Bo emerged from the shadows moments later, staggering. A fresh wound bled from his leg, but he was walking. He dropped his rifle beside the porch and collapsed onto the steps. Clara ran to him. "Bo!" "I'm fine," he said, wincing. "It's over." "Are you sure?" He nodded. "Jed's gone. The others ran. We held." She helped him up. Eli stood nearby, eyes wide. Lila peeked from the cellar hatch. They had survived. The hours that followed were a blur of bandages, tears, and silence. Clara cleaned Bo's wound with shaking hands, whispering prayers as she stitched. Eli stayed close, his hand never leaving his mother's side. Lila fell asleep in Bo's coat. When the sun rose, painting the sky in gold and blood, the cabin still stood. The walls were riddled with bullet holes. The porch was broken, but they were alive. And the land, for the first time in weeks, was quiet. Clara sat beside Bo, her head on his shoulder, her heart heavy with exhaustion but filled with something more. They hadn't just protected their home. They had chosen to stand together, and in doing so, they'd become something new. Not just survivors, a family. The morning after the shootout was heavy with silence. Not the fragile silence of fear, but a deeper one. Settled, tired, vast. Clara stood on the porch, her arms wrapped tightly around her shawl, as she watched the rising sun stretch pale gold across the frostbitten field. The earth, broken and bruised from the chaos of the night before, glittered with icy dew. Patches of scorched grass and churned-up mud dotted the yard where hooves had pounded and bodies had fallen. The smell of gunpowder still lingered faintly in the air, clinging to the wood of the cabin, to the fabric of her dress, to her hair. She couldn't remember the last time she'd felt so worn out. Every muscle ached, every breath dragged with the weight of what they'd survived. Behind her, through the doorway, came the soft sounds of life returning. Lila's sleepy murmurs as she stirred from her place beside the hearth. Eli's cautious footsteps across the floor, already tending to the fire. And Bo's low groan as he tried to shift in the rocker, his bandaged legs stiff and angry from the bullet wound. Clara didn't turn. She just kept staring at the horizon, her hands gripping the railing until her knuckles turned white. She wasn't crying. There were no tears left in her, not after what she'd seen. But inside, something was unraveling. Not from pain, not from grief, from something else. Relief. And something dangerously close to peace. Beau's voice came softly from behind her. They won't come back. She didn't answer right away. A bird landed on the fence post, chirped once, then flitted off toward the trees. They always come back, she finally said. Even if it's not them, it's someone. Always someone. He limped toward her, slower than usual. When he reached her side, he didn't speak, just stood there, eyes on the same stretch of sky. You were right, Clara said. We ended it. But it don't feel like an ending. It will, Beau said. Not now. Maybe not for a while, but it will. They stood there in silence, shoulder to shoulder, the wind tugging gently at their sleeves. Inside, Eli had started to boil water for tea. Lila had set her doll up on the windowsill, facing the sunrise. For all they had seen, the children seemed stronger, not unscarred, but changed, rooted. Clara turned to go back inside, pausing as she looked at the bloodstains on the porch. She'd need to scrub them out later. Or maybe not. Maybe some stains were meant to stay, like scars on wood, telling the truth in silence. She knelt beside Beau and changed his bandage without speaking. He hissed slightly as she tugged the cloth free. Sorry, she said. I've had worse. That don't mean this don't hurt. He smiled faintly. You always talk like that? Like what? Like a woman who sees through men. Clara didn't look up. I've had to. Later that day, she walked the property line with Eli. The boy held his rifle close, but not like a child playing pretend. He was different now, older in the eyes, shoulders set with purpose. She wished he hadn't changed so fast, wished he could go back to watching clouds and picking berries. But survival asked things of people that peace never would. They buried the bodies just past the creek, far from the house. Clara didn't want them near the garden, near the barn, near anything sacred. Beau said a few words, nothing poetic, nothing grand, just facts. These men had chosen wrong, and now they were gone. The ground was hard from the frost, and it took most of the day. When they finished, Clara stood with her hands tucked deep in her apron pockets, staring at the small wooden crosses Eli had carved. There were 5 of them. Jed's body had never been found. Beau said he'd been wounded bad and likely dragged himself off into the trees to bleed out alone. But Clara wasn't so sure. Men like Jed didn't die easy, and silence could sometimes lie. Still, they planted the crosses. They said the names of the dead if they knew them. They didn't ask for peace, but they gave it anyway. That night, Beau sat with the children beside the fire, while Clara patched a hole in the wall left by a bullet. The boards were splintered, jagged, and it would take more than cloth to fix. Still, she worked at it, sewing in silence, the needle passing through rough canvas like a rhythm in her hands. Tell us a story, Lila said suddenly. Clara looked up. Beau blinked, surprised. A story? He asked. Yes, a cowboy one. Beau looked at Clara, then back at the girl. He cleared his throat. Once, there was a man who rode alone. No home, no family, just his horse in the trail. He made his living catching wild cattle and taming them. Folks said he had no heart, that he didn't need one. Why not? Lila asked. Because when you don't care, nothing can hurt you. Eli leaned forward. But one day, Beau continued, he came across a cabin deep in the woods. There was a woman there and 2 children. They didn't have much. Just a garden, a leaky roof, and each other. But they gave the man soup. They gave him a place to sleep. They didn't ask questions. Clara stopped sewing. The man planned to leave the next day, Beau said, staring into the fire. But something made him stay. Maybe it was the smell of bread. Maybe it was the sound of laughter. Maybe it was the way the woman looked at him like he wasn't broken. He paused. And after a while, the man realized something. He wasn't made to ride alone. He wasn't a ghost. He was just a man who needed somewhere to belong. Lila clapped quietly. Eli smiled. Clara didn't speak. When the children went to bed, Bo walked over to her. "You knew that was about me." She shrugged. "Maybe it was about me." He chuckled. "Maybe it was about all of us." Weeks passed. The snow came early, soft and relentless, blanketing the world in white. The cabin became a cocoon of warmth. The outside world faded, buried beneath the silence of winter. Clara hung herbs to dry by the hearth. Bo built shelves for the pantry. Eli read books that Bo brought back from town. Lila learned to sew tiny dresses for her doll. Sometimes, Bo would ride into town for supplies. He wore a scarf over his face and didn't stay long. The marshal had kept his word. He didn't ask questions. Word had spread that the Callahan feud was over. Jed was either dead or gone. The land was quiet now. Bo started talking about staying. Not in words, in actions. He repaired the barn roof in the middle of a snowstorm. He carved a new sign for the cabin's gate. Jennings, etched in clean, deep letters. He planted new fence posts in frozen ground, his hands raw but steady. Clara saw it, felt it, but she didn't bring it up. Not yet. One evening, while the children played by the fire, she sat beside him on the porch, a blanket draped over both their shoulders. "You gonna stay?" she asked, her voice soft. He didn't answer right away, just looked out over the hills, now covered in snow. "I don't have anywhere else," he said. "And even if I did, I don't want it." Clara nodded. He turned to her. "But I won't stay unless you want me here." "I never asked you to leave." That was all she had to say. In spring, the flowers returned. Yellow blooms along the fence line, green buds on the branches. The creek thawed, and the birds returned, chirping like they'd never left. Clara stood in the garden, digging fresh rows, when Bo came up behind her with a small wooden box. "What's that?" she asked. He opened it slowly. Inside was a silver ring, worn but polished, simple but strong. "It was my mother's," he said. Clara stared. Bo cleared his throat. "I know I'm not a perfect man, but I've never wanted anything as much as I want to stay here, with you, with them, build something real." Clara didn't cry. She just smiled, slid the ring onto her finger, and kissed him. That summer, they planted twice as much. Eli rode with Bo to town for supplies. Lila got a new doll with a blue dress. The neighbors came by more often, bringing gifts, stories, and respect. No one asked about Jed Callahan again, and Bo never rode away. Because sometimes, the richest men are the ones who lose everything and find a reason to start over. Not with gold, not with land, but with love. In the heart of the unforgiving frontier, one broken man found healing, one grieving woman found strength, and two children found the father they never knew they needed. Poor Widow and Her Kids Saved Dying Rich Cowboy isn't just a story about survival. It's a testament to how love can grow in the harshest soil, how family can be built from strangers, and how redemption often comes when we least expect it. If this story touched your heart, just wait until you hear what else we've got riding down the trail. Subscribe now to Wild West Love Chronicles and saddle up for more gripping tales of romance, redemption, and the raw beauty of the American frontier. Don't miss a single journey. Hit that bell and ride with us every week.